Welcome to the Wicket.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of The Wicket, the cricketing podcast from Arab News. And this episode is special because we're going to preview one of the biggest events on the global cricketing calendar, the ICC Men's T20 World Cup, which is all set to take place in the USA and the Caribbean. It's 55 matches over 28 days spanning 10 venues. Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, which is hosting the final on June the 29th, Guyana, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are 2 venues in Trinidad and Tobago, plus 3 in the USA, in Florida, New York and Texas. There are 20 teams too, making this the biggest World Cup of all time in terms of participation. I'm Brian Murgatroyd, and with me to analyse what to look out for and what might happen in the tournament are Arab News columnist Jon Pike and Arab News cricket reporter Subas Humagain. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Brian. Hi, Subas.
Hi, John. Hi, Brian.
Now, I mentioned there are 20 teams, and those teams have been divided into 4 groups of 5, with the top 2 sides from each going through to the second stage, the Super 8s, qualification for which guarantees an appearance at the next event in Sri Lanka and India in 2026. The way we'll go about our preview is to look at each group in turn. After we've done that, we'll ask Jon and Subas to tell us their top 2 from each of those groups, and then we'll ask each to nominate a winner. Lots to discuss then, so let's get cracking. Let's begin at the beginning then. Group A, and this features 2 of Asia's heavyweights, India and Pakistan, plus Ireland, Canada and the co-hosts, the USA. This is the group that will set the ball rolling for the tournament when the USA and Canada face each other in Dallas, Texas on Sunday the 2nd of June, while the marquee clash is India versus Pakistan. That's in New York a week later. Jon, I'm sure there are people looking at this group as an example of why this tournament shouldn't have been expanded to 20 teams from the previous mark of 16 in Australia 2 years ago, because on paper this appears a formality, you would say, for India and Pakistan to reach the next stage. Is that the way you see it?
Well, it should be, but both Ireland and the US have shown they're capable of pulling off a shock. USA have recently beaten Bangladesh 2-1. Ireland has previous scalps, notably England, of course, as recently as the 2022 T20 World Cup in a rain-affected match. Even in Canada, which has tailed off recently after a good run of form, is capable of a shock. There is potential for at least one shock in this group, and I think it would be a major one if India and Pakistan don't progress.
Well, that said, both India and Pakistan arrive at this tournament with question marks over them. Subas, India's players are arriving in 2 groups: the players whose IPL teams were knocked out before the playoffs and those whose sides made it into the top 4 of that tournament. As a group, they haven't been together, and there'll no doubt be some tired bodies as well. They have been playing 2 months of T20 cricket. Where do India sit, do you think, at the outset of this tournament?
Well, having IPL just before the World Cup, it benefits individuals, but I think it's not be the same as a team. The players are in the group, but I don't think they are in the same page team-wise. They may have got plans ready on paper, but to replicate it in the field is a totally different job. And with some players not being in the same page in the IPL teams, I think that dressing room is not going to be a normal one. And on top of all this, the players are joining late. Coaching staff will need to plan things accordingly, fitness-wise, role-wise as well. And we've seen traveling reserves, some selection headache already been there, some calls of late changes in the team as well. So I think it's going to be a tough one to gel in and be as a one unit.
And Jon, it's a last hurrah for Rahul Dravid as head coach. He's made it clear he doesn't want an extension of his contract, and there's been a scramble publicly and privately to line up the successor. Is that a point of focus for the coach and the team, or a distraction, or simply doesn't it matter?
More importantly, the spectre of previous failures seems to hang heavy. The ODI final last November, semi-final defeat in 2022, World Test Championship last June, as well as some mixed IPL performances by key team members, notably the captain and vice-captain. So I don't think it should be a distraction. since it's out in the open. And Jay Shaw has quashed some rumours and narrowed the field by saying that the next coach must have some in-depth knowledge of the Indian domestic game and structure. It may provide some focus, once they all get there, that is, but I suspect it's probably a non-event.
And Subas, on paper, India look impressive, but as John alluded to there, remember how they were humbled at the last edition, losing the semi-final by 10 wickets to eventual champions England. Can you see them repeating their triumph of the inaugural event back in 2007 this time?
If you ask me, I think India will have it tough in Super 8s. There were easy group stage matches against Ireland, US and Canada. I think the Pakistan game is the only one that will have them tested. But having to play Super 8 won't be easy. And I think India are playing their first 3 matches in New York, then to Florida, and Super 8 will be in West Indies, where they'll not be before the halfway of the tournament. I think they'll be new to the surroundings, and Dravid's outgoing, unsettled squad, Super 8 fixtures in West Indies. I think that's going to be tough for the second half of the tournament.
John, turning to Pakistan, the losing finalists from 2 years ago, it's Gary Kirsten's first assignment as the team's white ball coach in a major event. What influence can he have, having only just come in through the door? Remember, he did coach India to the 2011 Cricket World Cup, but he did have significant lead time before that event. He hasn't had that this time.
No, I think the impact's going to be marginal at this point, even allowing for a new coach effect. It's not clear that Babar Azam is in harmony with the team or vice versa. Not having Rizwan as keeper doesn't seem a great move to me. Played well in patches against England in the first match, but we may get some more clues in the second and third matches if rain allows.
Subas, Pakistan have been modest in their build-up. The series in England, which has been rain-affected, as John alluded to there, and before that, a scratchy 2-1 series win in Ireland, and an even scratchier 2-2 draw with an understrength New Zealand in Pakistan. Can we read anything into these results, or do we just have to reflect that Pakistan can simply find another gear, as they so often have in the past at major events?
To start with, they didn't have the main coaching unit in any of that series, and also they were experimenting the squad in all these matches. They rarely played the same squad for 2 consecutive games, and now that the squad is sorted, the coaching unit is together, I think they should start gaining the momentum, especially the batting unit that needs to be settled. Usman Khan and Azam Khan both are there. I think that was a bit of surprise, and they yet to prove themselves in the green, and they're playing the World Cup. I think that's going to be a big turning point on how they play, and that's going to decide Pakistan's fate.
Well, John, you mentioned him earlier, Babar Azam. He's back as captain after a very brief stint by Shaheen Shah Afridi, who, incidentally, it's turned out, has turned down the vice-captaincy. Can Babar galvanise the side and find his best form after conspicuously failing to do that at the Cricket World Cup last year? And what about that move by Shaheen to turn down the vice-captaincy? Is there trouble in the camp, do you think?
You would have thought so. Certainly be trouble in Shaheen's mind, I guess. And the evidence is pretty thin on whether Babar can galvanise the side. I think the initial indications aren't particularly good for that. The tournament does need him to find his form, and not just Pakistan.
And Subas, Pakistan have gone pace-heavy, and that includes Haris Rauf, who dislocated his shoulder in this year's Pakistan Super League. Do you like the look of their squad?
I feel it's a bit of a bowler heavy. The all-rounders they have are more of a bowlers than batters, especially the spinners. But Coach Kirsten, I think he's more aligned towards batting progress. His trust in the individuals that he's picked. And even though they've got Rauf in his squad, I think they know that someone's there to back him up. And even if he's not 100% near the start, they'll have someone covering him up. I think it's more that Rauf will be used more in the back end of the tournament. Come World Cup, he'll be ready to go, especially in the West Indies leg.
So that's Pakistan and India, but what of the other teams in Group A? Well, Ireland had that series against Pakistan on home soil, and since then they've won a tri-series against the Netherlands and Scotland, as well as running Afghanistan close in Sharjah in March. John, Ireland have got Josh Little, the left-arm fast bowler, back from the Indian Premier League, where he played for Gujarat Titans. They've got Mark Adair, whose all-round form has been excellent. They've got depth in batting and experience at the top with Paul Stirling, the white ball captain, and Andrew Balbirnie. Can you see them threatening either Pakistan or India? Especially, don't forget, they beat Pakistan in one match in that recent series, and all seems settled in the camp as well. Coach Heinrich Milan, he's just signed a contract extension that takes him through to 2027.
I wouldn't be surprised to see them beat Pakistan, and I think India's probably a hope too far. The indications are that Pakistan camp is not a particularly happy one, and they've got obviously talented players, but on a day when the Ireland players perform to their outer limits, they could hope to spring a surprise.
Subas, the co-hosts, the USA, have been in remarkable form coming into this tournament. They beat Canada 4-1. And then they beat Bangladesh 2-1, although they did lose the third match by 10 wickets. Ali Khan, their talismanic fast bowler, has been in good form himself in that Bangladesh series. And they have the added experience of Corey Anderson, the former New Zealand all-rounder, as well as the coaching skills of Stuart Law. That series win over Bangladesh surely shows they can't be dismissed.
This certainly can't be. I think this is the best ever USA team that I have seen in recent years. They have a lot of experience within the squad, even though their players joining the squad as new players, and Corey Anderson, Harmeet Singh, Andrews Gause, and Sullivan Skelwick. Ali Khan's return has been pretty good, and the new players have gelled into the squad, and especially the role that they've given looks suited. They can bowl, they can contribute with the bat as well, and they just need their old guards in Taylor and Jones to fire. I think the spin department looks a bit bleak. I think they need to be worrying about that, but the part-timers were good enough to cover, and USA could spring a surprise in this one.
Well, John, how important is it that the USA bookmarks itself in the tournament they're co-hosting, or is this simply a first step, yet another first step on the road of a long journey to establishing cricket as a mainstream sport in the country?
More of the latter, in my view, especially with the 2028 Olympics on the horizon, plus the Major League coming up after the World Cup, which has attracted several big names, including Steve Smith.
Subas, for all the positives of Ireland and the USA, though, Canada's build-up has been chaotic. We mentioned that series loss to the USA, but there were also stories of the coach Prabodhu Desanaika being sacked during the team's preparatory camp after apparently showing signs of progress by reaching this tournament and returning to the top tier of the associate game in the 50-over format. They look shambolic all of a sudden again, don't they?
Well, if there is interest in picking team from off the field, such things are bound to happen. There were reports of Prabodhu getting the sack just a few days back, and that was after he was ousted of the selection panel. I think to have your team in such good situation, and all of a sudden to get this, I think it's a bit of injustice to the man who's worked so hard for the last 1.5 years. Prabodhu got them the ODI status. They're in the World Cup, T20 World Cup for the first time, and they had a good start to the league too. I think Prabodhu deserves better, and the board, I think they should be looking to have some respect to the man who's brought them into the cricketing scene.
Well, we've spoken about Group A with old rivals Pakistan and India, and also the USA and Canada. And Group B, likewise, has two teams whose cricketing rivalry goes back a long, long way. That's Australia and England. The group also features Namibia, Oman and Scotland. John, let's start with England, as they're the defending champions after beating Pakistan in the final at the Melbourne Cricket Ground in 2022. Back then, they held both white ball titles, but since that point, there was the disappointing defence of the 50-over title in Asia last year, and that's heaped pressure on captain Jos Buttler and coach Matthew Mott to deliver this time. They have Kieran Pollard as an assistant coach for local knowledge. They have Jofra Archer back after 2 years of injury hell, and they've pulled players out of the latter stages of the Indian Premier League to ensure they're together as a group before the tournament. Have they got the build-up right this time? Are they ready to go, do you think?
Just about. I think eyebrows were raised over several inclusions, Chris Jordan and Moeen Ali, for example. It seems that Ali will deputise if Buttler has to return home on paternity leave. And we all hope the rain holds off to allow the remaining matches against Pakistan to provide the opportunity to get rid of residual rustiness.
Subas, England played a series in the Caribbean last December. They lost that one 3-2 to the West Indies, but it does mean they've got recent experience of conditions, and they have Phil Salt, who made 200s then and who's since impressed in the Indian Premier League. Do they have what it takes to go all the way, do you think?
England, for me, are one of the well-rounded squad in this World Cup. They've Archer coming in, who we saw playing in the club cricket in Caribbean to prepare himself for those conditions. England did the right thing by bringing players early from IPL, which could prove to be a difference between England and India in the long run. Buttler and Salt, I think both are fantastic IPL. Will Jacks is equally capable of backing them up. Bairstow had a bit of a bleak tournament, but I think when they're gelled in this squad, it's a different feeling.
Well, John, England have opted opted to have Jos Buttler behind the stumps ahead of Phil Salt, despite potential issues that could raise with communication with bowlers. And that's an important consideration, isn't it? Given over 8 penalties in this tournament, overs must start 60 seconds after the previous one finishes, and 3 failures to do that means a 5-run penalty. So having Buttler behind the timbers, is that the right decision?
I think so, yes. I know it's a tough ask, keeping wicket, being captain and opening. He's got plenty of experience of it. As a keeper, he's in the best place to set what the batters are doing. I'm sure they've talked about alternative communication lines, and that's probably one of the main reasons that Moeen Ali's in the squad.
Subas, what about Australia? The 2022 champions. They've got questions to answer. The captain, Mitchell Marsh, missed a large part of the IPL with a hamstring injury. And David Warner, almost certainly in his final international event, had a poor and injury-affected IPL. There were suggestions, in fact, that Jake Fraser-McGurk would take his place. But Australia have stuck with Warner. Do you think that's the right decision?
Yeah, I think it is. Warner is running his last legs, and that adds extra bit of motivation to end his career on a high. We've seen him come out at his best in tougher times, and even though the Marsh is not fully fit, they've come in to cover leadership role. Stonish as like-for-like replacement in the lineup. Cameron Green, Team David, both didn't have their IPLs, but we know how devastating they can be in the day.
And Subas, what about Glenn Maxwell? He's gone from a player who could do little wrong at the Cricket World Cup in India late last year to one who could do little right during the IPL. Do you think he can suddenly re-find his best form?
If you look back, I think Australians playing for franchise and country look to be two different players. Seen Maxwell doing impossible things in yellow, and he's been struggling in club colours. But once he's settled, he can do nothing wrong. And the format, I think this suits him the best. Little things he does will have a huge impact. And he's rested himself in the midst of the RCB's struggle, and that has helped him mentally. RCB came back, couldn't make it through for a long run, but I think that will add him motivation. And joining the Australian team is a totally different thing, and he'll have a totally different mindset.
John Mitchell-Starc and Pat Cummins, they reached the final of the IPL, justifying Kolkata and Hyderabad's huge outlays on them. Will they now be ready for a T20 World Cup, do you think, or flagging after 2 months of heading all around India?
I'm sure they'll be very ready. I do note that Australia have only 9 of the 15 squad members available for warm-up matches, as those playing in the late matches in the IPL have gone home to Australia for a few days, so there's even more flying involved. We saw that Stark reached peak form in the closing stage of the IPL, and Cummins has been excellent throughout. I don't think they'll need any more motivation. But we talk about many of the teams being affected by not having full squads at this stage, a short while before the tournament. I just wonder, was there ever a time when there was some discussion about shortening the IPL in order to avoid what is now happening?
Well, if there was, it obviously fell on deaf ears.
Yeah.
So that's Australia and England we've chatted about in Group B. But what about Namibia? Remember, they were within a 6 hit by David Wiese of booking their place in the second round in 2022 after doing exactly that in 2021. And even in that last tournament in Australia, they beat Sri Lanka. Subas, they arrive via the African qualifiers, where they and Uganda came through at the expense of, amongst others, Zimbabwe. But they are without Nick Lofty-Eaton, a player who scored a T20 100 that you saw against Nepal in just 33 balls. He's been left out for unspecified disciplinary reasons. Was and is that the right decision?
Well, I was surprised to see him missing out, equally respecting the decision that was made. There should have been something big, or else I think Nico would walk into any squad of this associate teams. His batting needs no talking, but he could have been equally effective with his wrist spin, and the pass and the fielding he does is second to none. Sad part is Namibia, they don't have the same profile in the team, so he'll be a big miss. I think quality-wise, it could have been handled better, because it's World Cup that you're playing, and the quality he possesses, I think that shouldn't have been missed.
Well, John, you and Subas watched Oman in the recent Asian Cricket Council Premier Cup in Oman, where they lost out to the UAE. How ready do you think are Oman to take this stage?
As we've discussed before, they're an ageing side. They might be experienced, maybe, but I'm not expecting them to progress amongst the company that they sit in within this group.
And Subas, a change of captain for Oman too. Aqib Ilyas taking over from Zishan Maqsood. Aqib's the premier batter. Is it the right decision to give him the extra responsibility, or do you think he'll thrive in this role?
I think the timing is perfect. It's about giving liberty to Zishan more than putting responsibility to Akib. They're looking to establish Akib in the leadership role for a long run, and I think the big tournaments that will help him get the experience. He's been deputizing Zishan for a long time now, and Zishan, on the other hand, I think he'll call it a swan song after to his career after this tournament, and would certainly want to end it in high and a bit of a free mentality to contribute with both ball and bat.
Well, Scotland are the other side in this group. They're the nearly men of ICC events, having come close to qualifying for the past two Cricket World Cups. But cricket in the country, after a racism row derailed progress, seems to be on the up again after the women qualified for their own T20 World Cup later this year. Jon, 2 years ago, they humbled the West Indies, but then they couldn't go on to the second round following defeats to Ireland and Zimbabwe. And before that, they did reach the second round in 2021, having beat Bangladesh. What are your expectations for Scotland this time round, and why?
It's the fourth straight appearance, I think, in a T20 World Cup. And I think their chances depend on how they fare against England in the first match. Lose that, and I think they will struggle to go further.
Subas, they do have Chris Soule, who really excited with his pace in the Cricket World Cup qualifier last year, as well as all-rounder Brandon McMullen, another player who was outstanding at that tournament. What do you expect from them? Their build-up has been a tri-series in the Netherlands, which was won by Ireland, and they did show signs of rustiness.
I'm expecting them to spring a few surprises like they have been doing in the biggest stage. They're well-rounded squad. Monsi at the top is ever dangerous. Lisk and McMullen, like you said, balance the squad with their all-round ability, and I think Chris Soule, he'll be helped by left-arm Curry and Safian. Teenager Charlie Tier has been drafted in and could make the mark with his batting, his explosive batting in the top order.
So that's Group B. Let's move on now to Group C. And Group C is an intriguing one. It features co-hosts, the West Indies, twice champions in this tournament, and a side full of big hitters and entertainers. There's also Afghanistan, who had a host of players in the latest IPL, including Captain Rashid Khan. There's New Zealand, the runners-up in 2021, plus Papua New Guinea and Uganda. Let's start with the co-hosts, Jon, the West Indies. It's a team of all the talents, and on paper, it does look impressive. But thanks to the IPL, they've had no time together as a unit, and instead have had to make do with some players playing a West Indies A series in Nepal, and also a warm-up series against South Africa, which admittedly has gone extremely well, a 3-0 success there, whilst others are still at the IPL or resting after taking part in that event. Does the lack of time together beforehand make a difference, do you think? Or are they literally the Harlem Globetrotters of cricket and they can come together and turn it on like turning a tap on?
I think you've summed it up well there. I think in their case it doesn't really matter. Surely they'll be spurred on by playing at home. A number of the players are in good form. Look at Andre Russell. He looks invigorated and says that he's in a very good place. I would expect them to progress, particularly as they've shown great form against South Africa.
Yes, Andre Russell, part of the Kolkata Knight Riders, which has lifted the IPL title for 2024. Perhaps most importantly of all, there's no Sunil Narine, who's just had the IPL of his life with ball and bat. Could the West Indies have done any more, do you think, to try and get him to come out of international retirement?
I'm not sure they could. He seemed pretty adamant that he wouldn't play, despite attempts by his colleagues of the West Indians in the IPL to persuade him. It's a shame because he would be likely to have made a difference.
Yes, an incredible IPL, 488 runs at a remarkable strike rate and 17 wickets as well, but he's on the outer for this tournament. Subas, it's a home World Cup for the West Indies. They didn't win the tournament when it was last staged in the Caribbean in 2010, and the hosts have never won this event. What are you expecting this time? Will the West Indies be lifted by the home support, or will they be weighed down by the burden of expectation, do you think?
I think they're still not got out for the final order. They do have T20 specialists in the team, but we've seen one bad game could make everything go wrong in such case. It will be tough to force out balanced playing 11 from the squad in the first place. And playing at home is never easy with the constant change of venues. You don't see that home advantage in the middle. It's good that you're going to have fans, but what matters is getting to know the feel of that playing pitch, and that's ever changing in this tournament.
Well, Afghanistan were one win away from being in the Cricket World Cup semi-finals last year. Since then, they've beaten Ireland in that series we've mentioned already in Sharjah in March, before the core of their squad has spent the last 2 months at the IPL. It's a question we've asked of other sides too, John, but is that lack of team togetherness, that cohesion immediately before this World Cup a hindrance? Or does the fact players like Rashid Khan, Ramanullah Gurbas, Noor Ahmed and others, the fact that they've been in T20 mode for the past 2 months, count for more on the flip side?
I think the team's national circumstances seem to provide the necessary togetherness, so I don't see it as a particular issue for Afghanistan. I think more importantly was the exposure in the IPL. And Stuart Law, of course, a former coach and knows them well, said that he's expecting great things from them in this World Cup.
Yes, Stuart Law, of course, now coach of the USA, but he knows these players very well indeed. Subas, on paper, Afghanistan have a side to rival most others. They've got quality seam bowling, outstanding spin, big hitters. Can they turn it on the biggest stage in a place where they played their first major global event back in 2010?
Afghanistan on one day, I think they look like old beaters, and another day they falter like nobody else. Lack of consistency has hurt the team in crunch situations, be it miscalculating the run rate in Asia Cup or not making most of the situation in the World Cup ahead of that Maxwell innings. I think Afghanistan have gone near, they have the quality, but they need to be consistent to pass the mark and establish themselves as one of the biggest.
What about New Zealand? They've got experience and they've got quality. They've got Devon Conway back after the left-hander missed the whole of the IPL recovering from a broken thumb, plus a host of players like Trent Boult, Rachin Ravindra, Mitchell Santner and Daryl Mitchell, who were major players on that tournament. John, where do you see New Zealand ahead of this World Cup?
Well, under the radar, as usual. The last 3 T20 World Cups, they've been semi-finalists, as you mentioned, and runners-up in 2021. The squad is very experienced. I think there are only 2 changes, I think, from the previous Cup. But does it have enough young legs? And I sort of fear not. It looks to me like this group is a 3-way fight between the West Indies, Afghanistan and New Zealand. And I would imagine the outcome of the match between New Zealand and Afghanistan is going to be a determining factor.
Yes, it promises to be a real cracker of a group, this one. Subas, New Zealand have traditionally, as John alluded to there, been the bridesmaids of ICC white ball events, runners-up in 2021. But they've got one of the greatest T20 spinners in history, Anish Sodhi. Do you think they can win this time?
There are challenges for sure, but winning one, I think that's going to be tough. Their second string side got the result against Pakistan, but now they have some big names coming into the squad. If you look on the hindsight, they have only 2 changes from the last campaign, and this could be last of it for some of the players, and they no doubt would want to end it on high.
Absolutely. But what about the 2 associate sides in this group, Uganda and Papua New Guinea? For PNG, this is a second time at the T20 World Cup. They played in 2021 in the UAE and Oman. Subas, they say they're better prepared this time, as last time there were COVID restrictions that played a part in their build-up. Can you see them troubling any sides this time?
It's tough to say that, but the way they are here, it still amazes me how they pull these results despite having so small player pool. The players we've seen in their team are around for decades, and despite near to non-existent domestic structure, they managed to pull off the results. Asad Bhara has set an example leading the team. Charles Amini and Norman Banu, I think these are going to be difference makers for their T20 results. And Phil Simmons coming into the squad, I think that will certainly benefit them.
Yes, Phil Simmons coming in as a coaching consultant. The team coached by Tatenda Taibu, the former Zimbabwe captain and wicketkeeper batter. John, it's good to see PNG on this stage, isn't it? Especially as the women's team is making great strides too. They were given ODI status in 2021 and recently toured Zimbabwe, winning a T20I against the hosts. Cricket, it appears, is on the up there.
Yes, it seems so, especially when you consider the competition in the East Asia Pacific region is not really preparing them for the biggest stage. You know, they play Vanuatu, Philippines and Japan. So I don't think you really expect them to produce any shocks. As Sebastian's mentioned, they rely on probably 3 players on most of the matches.
Yes, it is a serious problem, not just for PNG, but for quite a few associate teams to get a quality of opposition on a regular basis that allows them to make progress and become better players and better teams. John, this is a debut for Uganda as well. They've got in all-rounder Alpesh Ramjani, a member of the ICC Men's T20 International Team of the Year. But do they have the depth in quality and experience to test the other sides in their group?
I doubt it. They have the oldest player in the name squads, 43-year-old Frank Zubuga, an off-spinning all-rounder. Oman's Mohammed Nadim and Nazim Kouchi are 41, so he's got a couple of years on them. Apart from Ramjani, they've got Simon Sesezi, the only batter from Uganda to score more than 2,000 T20 runs. And they have a new coach recently appointed from India, Abhay Sharma. But I think they'll benefit from the experience, would be the polite way of putting it.
Well, Subas, it has been a slow burn for Uganda, hasn't it, in terms of the development? I remember seeing them in the 2006 ICC Under-19 Cricket World Cup, and one member of that squad, actually, Roger Makassa, is here again now in 2024. Slow and steady development since then. I think that's the fair way of putting it, isn't it?
Well, they are in the region that has Zimbabwe also vying for the qualifiers, and this time they got better of them. The fact that Zimbabwe are not in the World Cup will put more pressure on Uganda. I think to get something out of the World Cup is tough, but they'll have an eye on that PNG match. I think getting the win would be an excellent thing for the country as a whole here at the World Cup, first time, and this would make a mark.
Well, when the groups were announced, I said that Group D was a group of death when we were chatting on an episode of The Wicket. And that's because it looks, on paper at least, the most competitive. It features Bangladesh, South Africa, Sri Lanka, the Netherlands and Nepal. And it promises some of the most cutthroat action of the first round. Subas is following Nepal at the tournament, and so where better to begin than with him and with the prospects of Nepal. Subas, the team is back on the main stage after a gap of 10 years and has had an exhaustive build-up, including a home series against West Indies A, which we've alluded to already. They performed well in that series, but prior to that came a disappointing fourth in the Asian Cricket Council Premier Cup in Oman. What is the mood around the team going into this tournament? Is it optimism or trepidation?
I'd say optimism. The team has bounced back well with consecutive wins in practice matches to stop batting conditions in Houston, despite the team Houston Hurricanes being lower on quality, but they got used to the conditions, and matches against USA and Canada in the warm-ups will help them further to get used to the surface in Grand Prairie. Both matches are in the same ground that they'll be playing Dutch in the first match.
And the big question mark is over the fact that star spinner Sandeep Lamachan, available again for the national side, has been refused a US visa and so will not be part of the squad. How much of a blow is that? And can the squad cope in his absence?
Well, I don't think the team will take it that way. If he joins, it will be a bonus for the team to have a player of such caliber. But even if he can't join, the team goes the way they have been playing. The team has full 3 times and 3 part-time spinner. And I think his absence is already covered. The team is in the mindset, even if he's not there, they're playing cricket for past few months and they'll continue to do so.
John, let's talk South Africa. They've gone under the radar in the build-up to the tournament as most of their key players, including Captain Aidan Markram, Kagiso Rabada, Quinton de Kock, Gerard Coetzee, Riley Rousseau, Marco Jansen, Tristan Stubbs, Anrik Nortje and Heinrich Klaassen have been performing at the IPL. The last major event they won, an ICC event, the only one in fact, was the ICC knockout in 1998. With that array of talent, though, surely they must consider themselves as real contenders this time.
Well, I was surprised to see that they are the bookmakers' choice for the semi-finals behind India, Australia and England. And they picked players who perform well in domestic cricket, as the coach said he would. But they're outplayed by the West Indies in warm-ups, as we've already mentioned. They have worries about the form of Quinton de Kock, especially. Also, several of the other batters. And they have concerns about the form and fitness of Nortje. They look good on paper. But they need to realise this talent, I think, in order to avoid what might turn out to be another disappointing campaign.
Well, South Africa were beaten by the Netherlands in the previous T20 World Cup, a result that cost them progress in that tournament. And the Netherlands did the same to South Africa in the Cricket World Cup in India, a match you were at, John. What about the Dutch? Can they produce form to shake the big boys again this time? Their build-up hasn't been all that inspiring, I think it's fair to say. They finished third in their own tri-series against Ireland and Scotland. They've lost spinner Daniel Dorham and Fred Klaassen to last-minute injuries. Doesn't look all that promising for the Dutch, does it?
No, but I wouldn't rule it out. I'm sure they'll take inspiration from those previous victories.
Yes, the one thing you can depend upon with the Dutch is that they'll never give in. They're the most indefatigable team that you can wish to see. Subas, what about Bangladesh? To me, they seem absolutely impossible to read. They beat Zimbabwe 4-1 in a home series, but then they've gone to the USA for warm-up matches, and they've lost a series to the co-hosts, the associate team, although they did win the third match of that series by 10 wickets, with Mustafiza Rahman taking an incredible 6 for 10. Where do they sit in the grand scheme of things, do you think?
Well, Bangladesh are in really tough group this time, the group of death, as you called it, and they'll need to be best in all games. The bowling attack looks good. I think Mustafiza is back in the group. It's the batting that needs to be consistent now. Saqib Al Hassan is having to play a role in the middle order, leave the space for youngsters Rido and Zakir who can strike the ball. But I think that top orders, Santo being the anchor of the innings, captain of the team, needs to be leading the team in both fronts.
And Sri Lanka, John, remember they were Asia Cup winners in this format a couple of years ago in the UAE, but they have had injury question marks over captain Wanindu Hasaranga, who missed the IPL, and fast bowler Matisha Patirana, who got injured during the tournament. They've got an interesting blend of experience with the likes of former captains Angelo Matthews and Dasan Shanaka, and Dimuth Welelage, a spinner who's never actually played a 2020 international before the tournament. What do you make of them, John?
Well, the chances will be significantly improved if Hasaranga and Patirana are fit. Sri Lankan selectors say they will be fit. I think the batting's reasonably strong, and they've got good spinners for the conditions. And we know that on the slower West Indian wickets, spinners will be called into action. So I think there could be a bit of a dark horse.
Sri Lanka, of course, the champions back in 2014. Subas, Sri Lanka's preparations have involved internal matches at home ahead of the tournament, a complete contrast to what you've been watching with Nepal's build-up, where they've been playing everywhere and anywhere. Do you see merit in that Sri Lankan approach?
Well, they opted to stay home to prepare, unlike other teams were busy in camps away or playing series, but they are playing Netherlands in warm-up matches. So I think it's a bizarre scenario considering they will be facing again in 2 weeks' time as a group fixture of the World Cup. They still have Ireland to go before that big opening match against South Africa. So I think all relies on what they can produce against South Africa. If they have a good start, it will be easy route, but the pressure on that second match will be huge if they falter against the Proteas.
So that's all the groups assessed. Now it's time to work out what will happen. Time then to put you both on the spot. Which two teams will go through from each group and why? John, first of all.
I think we have to go with India and Pakistan in Group A, with Ireland as a possible outsider. Group B, England and Australia. I think a lot does depend upon the match against Scotland in that respect. Group C, very difficult to call. I think the West Indies and one of New Zealand or Afghanistan will go through, depending upon how they go in the head-to-head match. And in Group D, despite my reservations about South Africa, I think Sri Lanka and South Africa will go through.
Well, that's John's assessment. What about you, Subas? What do you think?
I'm sticking with India, Pakistan, and Australia, England for the first two groups. I think Group C, I'll see Afghanistan getting over the line with New Zealand. And for the Group D, I think South Africa will be there, but I'd have to carry my Nepal flag for that one.
I'm interested there, Subas, that you've decided not to go for the West Indies, the co-hosts in Group C there. What's your thinking?
I think Afghanistan are a better unit. West Indies, I've seen them in the West Indies A as well. Not much difference in quality, but it's a home series. The batting lineup especially, I think the players they have are of T20 quality, but can all of them fire as a unit? That has got me more interested in. I think they'll need some time to gel in, play as a team, and it's tough to play in the home in spite of home pressure.
Yes, that's a good point that you make, that a lot of the players are flying in at the 11th hour and they're going to be playing in front of very expectant crowds indeed. Well, we usually have a shock or two in the first round of this tournament. Where does each of you think that might come this time, if indeed it does? Subas, first of all, what do you reckon?
You might call me biased here, but I don't see why Nepal can't be the one. Also, Scotland might repeat feat of beating destination yet again. Also, imagine USA beating either India or Pakistan. What it would do to the future of the game in the country.
Well, John, Subas has got his Nepal-tinted spectacles on there. What about you? What colour spectacles are you wearing in terms of a surprise in the first round?
Well, I'll go with green ones for Ireland to beat Pakistan. And knowing that England always managed to mess a match up somewhere, why not choose a good time to lose to Scotland? And I'm looking to the Netherlands to with orange tints to beat South Africa yet again.
Well, John, with more pairs of glasses than Elton John there. For his choices of a possible surprise in the first round. And finally, gentlemen, really I am going to put you on the spot here. Who do you think will go on and win the tournament and why? John, first of all.
Australia, especially if Warner either has one last hurrah or is replaced by Fraser McGurk. I think what's going to be crucial in this tournament is power play wickets and or runs, middle order boundary hitting, especially as spinners are likely to be used, and ability to catch. And I think that Australia are probably best placed in these three key areas.
Well, just before I turn to Subas, you've raised a good point there, John, in terms of power play runs and power play wickets, because, of course, we saw an absolute run fest in the IPL. Do you anticipate a tournament that is going to be similar to the IPL here, or is it going to be a little bit more conservative? Because, of course, we haven't got the impact player in this tournament that we did have in the IPL.
True enough, but I think there's a mindset amongst top order batters and I think amongst the coaches that you really do need to make an impact in the power play and you have to take risks. And I think for the bowlers also, they're looking to try and gain an advantage. So I think that those early overs on wickets that maybe a little bit sluggish, perhaps. I don't think we're going to see the high scores, but I think we're going to see the same mental approach, certainly in the early stages.
And Subas, just before I put you on the spot there in terms of who you think will go on and win the tournament and why, what do you think about the possibility of a slightly different approach from players in this tournament as opposed to what we saw in the IPL?
I think the approach will be a bit different. It's playing for the country in the World Cup adds a bit of pressure. They'll need to be a bit relaxed, not go all guns blazing. But the IPL has shown how teams can operate with 100 class in Sunrisers Hyderabad, especially using the power play. So I think there's a bit of a pressure on openers to make the most of it with regard to what fans are going to expect.
And come on then, Subas. We've heard from John in terms of his expectations as to who's going to go on and win the tournament. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd like to second John. Australia are form favourites, but this could be a tournament for South Africa. If you look at the squad, they look like world beaters. They have got players in every position who can perform as the best. I think if you look at the IPL, Andrew Klassen, David Miller, Tristan Stubbs, that middle order, they've been leading their team in the IPL, and this could be the tournament that ends the hoodoo for South Africa.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit contrary with my prediction. I think it might be the occasion when New Zealand will finally ditch that bridesmaids tag and go on and lift an ICC trophy in white ball cricket. Let's see if I'm right. Let's see if John's right. Let's see if Subas is right. We'll find out soon enough because the tournament runs for just under a month. It gets underway on June the 2nd. And there you have it. That's our views ahead of the T20 World Cup. Doubtless you'll have your own too. Please don't forget to comment on what you've heard wherever you get your podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback. And like and subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've heard too, of course. For now, though, this is Brian Murgatroyd along with Jon Pike and Subas Humagain saying thanks for listening to us here at The Wicket, and we look forward to your company again next time.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.